when you get off the bus. I grew up in the countryside and my parents' house is in the mountains. I would take the early morning bus to school, which only ran once every few hours, and then wait for the bus to return to my hometown every few hours. Such was my high school life. One day, when school ended for morning classes, I was lucky enough to catch the noon bus and boarded it. During the daytime on weekdays, there were few people using the bus, and moreover, I think there were only about 7 passengers on the bus heading to my hometown, including me. I always leave home early in the morning, so I decided to take a nap on the 45-minute ride to the local bus stop, and I dozed off as I gazed out the window at the quiet cityscape. I woke up at the announcement and looked around to see that the number of passengers had decreased from 7 to 3, including myself. I had ridden many buses, but I did not recognize the name of the bus stop displayed. I press the buzzer to get off here before I end up in the middle of nowhere. The driver announces, "Next stop," and I look through the window to see if I recognize any familiar facilities or streets. However, this area was as rural as my hometown, with nothing but countryside, mountains, and wooded areas surrounded by nature, and only a few shack-like buildings could be seen here and there. I thought to myself, oh no, where is this place? The bus stopped and I stood up, carrying my bag, and for some reason the other 2 passengers also stood up and got off the bus after me. It was nothing to be conscious of, but it felt a little more reassuring than getting off alone at a bus stop I didn't know. The bus dropped us off and continued quietly down the empty mountain road, eventually melting into the background. I checked the timetable erected at the bus stop. The timetable was mostly white, and the next bus in our direction would be in 4 hours at the earliest. I looked down the street to see how long it would take to catch the next bus in the opposite direction, i.e., the one heading in the opposite direction to the city. Where's the bus stop? Where's the bus stop? I stood tall and looked here and there, but still there was no bus stop anywhere. As I was wondering how I was going to get back to the city, a voice suddenly called out to me, "Excuse me, do you know where we are? Excuse me, do you know where you are?" I must have dozed off. I turned around and there was a short old lady with a bent back. The gray-haired old lady looked around with a puzzled look on her face, and I instantly understood that she was someone in the same situation as I was. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I actually dozed off too. I got off in a hurry and, well, I couldn't find the bus stop on the other side." When I told her that there was no bus stop in the opposite direction, she looked at me half in disbelief and said, "What?" But as you can see, she had a mixed expression of disappointment and resignation when she realized that there was no timetable anywhere except for the bus stop where we had gotten off. When I suggested that we first check the timetable in front of us to see if any details were written on it, the old lady followed anxiously, saying, "Yes, that's right. The bus stop is a Showa-style wooden structure." Looking up at the rusty red timetable, I saw that it was only a one-way trip. I traced the small letters with my index finger to make sure I didn't miss a single one, but there was no one-way information anywhere, and I was at a loss. In the midst of all this, another man got off here. A man dressed in a suit, looking like an office worker, was frequently fiddling with his cell phone in one hand and his laptop in the other, blurting out, "Damn it, why can't I connect?" I looked in the direction the bus was coming from and decided that the only way to get back was to walk. Before I did, I walked up to the man and asked, "Excuse me, are you still out of range?" I asked him with my last hope, but he replied, "Oh, yeah. I can't get a phone call, and the internet is dead. I can't even search for a location," he replied with a despairing look on his face. Maybe he was on his way to work or on his way to a client, I thought to myself. At any rate, working people must be even more chilled by this situation than I am as a student. I thought to myself, I think I have no choice but to walk back the way the bus came. What will you do? As a student, I have the stamina to walk for about half a day if I just walk. However, It must be tiring for an old lady to just walk, and for a man to travel long distances in leather shoes. However, there is no other way to return from this strange land except to walk back, even slowly. If there was someone around, we might be able to borrow a phone or something, but unfortunately, not a single person was to be found. My legs. Grandma rubbed her knee. She was probably having trouble with her knees. I don't want to stay here. Grandma, let's go back the way we came. If we pass another car on the road, we can ask for help like hitchhikers. Worst case scenario, we can negotiate for a cab. Oh, a working man indeed. The man encouraged the old lady and pointed out the direction she should go. I felt ashamed of myself for thinking that if I just kept walking the way I had come, I would eventually get to the city. Then the three of us started walking along the barely paved road. The old lady used one of my arms as a walking stick. The man was walking at the front of the pack, carrying our bags alone, cell phone in hand, as he observed the area. I think we had walked about 30 minutes to get here. What I found out was that this was an uninhabited settlement with no sign of people. There was zero traffic. On the way, we saw several houses with a sense of life that was difficult to determine whether they were shacks or abandoned houses, so the men took the initiative to knock on doors and attempted to negotiate with the residents to lend them their phones. However, none of the houses responded. We were gradually struck by a sense of unreality, and the fear of will we really be able to go home. We were anxious about whether we would be able to return home. The strange scarecrow is usually thought of as a cross-shaped stick with a hat and clothes on, but for some reason, the scarecrows in this town have the appearance of an elaborate wax doll, and from a distance, it looks as if a human being is standing on the stick. And for some reason, all the scarecrows face inward, as if they are watching us as we walk along the road. Seriously, an abandoned village? This place. As expected, the man became impatient as the reality that he would have to spend more than half a day walking to the town came into view. I was worried about the grandmother's stamina, or rather the condition of her knees, and I was beginning to think that it would be torture to continue walking for more than half a day. At that time, we saw a tractor, or perhaps it was a tractor, with a red body and a tall vehicle, which is often seen in agriculture, striding down the road. I saw a vehicle with a red body and a high ride height, often seen in agriculture, striding down the road, and it seemed to be coming toward us just in time. It had already been less than an hour so far. When we finally met the first villagers, we smiled from the bottom of our hearts and attempted to make contact with them as the men waved at us. A tractor pulls up near us, and a smoldering uncle gets out from inside and glares at us. He was dressed in a simple white shirt with his arms rolled up, as if he was in the middle of farming, and his jacket was off and wrapped around his waist, a work outfit. And his face was quite impersonal. For a moment, I thought I had encountered a yakuza, and I was in a hurry. I thought that working people are dependable in person, and I was left to my own devices, inwardly marveling at the man's appearance. However, as if to make the man's negotiations impassive, the uncle brushed it off in a troublesome manner, saying, "Nobody lives here." Then why is he here? I wondered, but I didn't have the courage to speak my mind to the strong-looking man, so I watched the proceedings from behind him. "I'm sorry, but could I borrow your phone so I can get in touch with you outside? Can't you at least call me a cab or something?" The man was insistent. The man's persistence must have made him give up, because he said, "Well, I'm going to get a car, so you guys go straight down this road or wait there," and got on his tractor and drove off somewhere. He said he was going to get a car, so I guess I should take it that he would pick us up in a car that could fit all of us. The man was smiling and said, "I did it, now I can get back somehow." The old lady was also rubbing her knees, saying, "Thank God," and I asked her, "Are you okay?" I asked her, "Are you all right?" She replied, "I'm almost there, so I have to hang in there." I was bored waiting around for her, so I slowly made my way down the road, taking it easy on her knees, and after about 30 minutes, a light truck arrived. When it pulled up right next to us, a Yakuza-looking man peeked out from the driver's seat and motioned with his thumb for us to get in the back of the truck. At this point, we could not afford to be extravagant, and it was a good thing we didn't care what the law said. We looked at each other anxiously and then climbed into the back of the truck. Surprisingly, the ride was comfortable, and although the road was bumpy due to the bad road, we were enjoying the scenery and thinking that it was a picturesque place in its own way when we looked over the mysterious village surrounded by mountains. The light truck arrived at a one-story house that resembled several shacks we had seen in the past. After dropping us off, the man unlocked the old-fashioned front door fitted with frosted glass and said, "Go on up and make yourself at home. I'll call you a cab," he said brusquely, picking up the black phone in the hallway. Surprised by the black phone, we visited the house and found the door to the Japanese-style room on the front porch open, which we interpreted to mean that we should rest here. It was an ordinary Japanese-style room of about 6 tatami mats. There was a box-type TV set and a table with a tablecloth. A Japanese chest of drawers and tatami mats full of signs of use. The house looked like a reproduction of the Showa period itself, but I breathed a big sigh of relief from the joy of finally being able to relax. The uncle was also very kind and helpful, although his mouth and demeanor are blunt. The grandmother and the man were also very cooperative, and I was truly glad I was not alone. They were very helpful. "There's nothing else to do until the cab comes," I jokingly said to them, and the man looked at the uncle in the hallway quizzically. "Is something wrong?" No, I was just curious about something." When I looked at the uncle to see what was bothering him, I did indeed feel something strange about him. Although he appeared to be talking to the man in a perfectly normal manner with the receiver in his hand, as the man said, there was something wrong with his appearance. As the man and I tilted our heads and said, not understanding what was strange, the lady suddenly muttered, "I guess you can make a phone call without a cord now, huh?" "Yes, there is no cord." When that uncle used the black phone, he turned the central board with his finger, but I cannot find the cord that connects the handset to the main unit. Perhaps in this day and age, there are now black phones on the market that are independent, like a parent and child unit, but from my point of view, it was still the first time I had seen a black phone without a cord, and the man asked, "Is that thing connected?" The man asked anxiously, "Is that connected?" After a while, he put down the phone, came to us, told us that he would be here in a couple of minutes, and went to the kitchen. We would not know if the uncle's report was true until 30 minutes later. The man and I looked at each other breathlessly and whispered, "Did you really call us? Did that phone call really connect? Could it be that this person is a bad person?" I was worried that he might be a bad person. When he came back from the kitchen, he offered a cup of tea for everyone and said, "Make yourself at home until it's time. I'm going to work in the fields. When the cab arrives, you can go home." The three of us hurriedly thanked him for everything, but he walked out the front door without looking back and left the house with his tractor. We breathed a sigh of relief again as we took advantage of our uncle's goodwill and passed the time with tea, though we felt a little guilty for doubting whether this was a trap. I had no idea that the village was so empty and abandoned, and I regretted that I should have consulted the driver instead of getting off the bus at that time if this was going to happen, but I was beginning to feel relaxed, thinking that it is not so bad to enjoy such a taste of unreality. However, I fell asleep before I knew it, perhaps due to fatigue, and when I jumped up at the sound of a raven's cry, I realized that it was already dusk. There was an old lady and a man lying in the Japanese-style room who had also fallen asleep, so I shook their bodies to wake them up. I shook them awake. They both rubbed their eyes and said, "Huh?" But when they saw my face, they remembered the situation they were in and opened their mouths to say, "Oh," and the man stood up and looked out the window. "Is it dusk already? Where's the cab?" The man turns around and asks me, but when I tell him that I fell asleep as well as the two of them and just woke up, he is disappointed and says, "Really?" But soon he looks at the tea on the table and says ominously, "I feel sleepy after drinking this. Maybe there was something in this." No way. We had no way to be sure, so we were once again driven by anxiety. Did the cab come in the first place? And has the uncle returned at all since then? The man ran out the front door and checked where the car was parked. The man and I then checked the black phone that the uncle had been using, and sure enough, there was no cord. And when I picked up the receiver, there was no sound at all. Yes, not only was there no phone connected, but there was no power cord. What was he going to do to us? The man had indeed made a phone call in front of us, but it was all a monologue. He lied about calling a cab. I suspect he put sleeping pills in the tea. The cars are all hidden so that we can't escape immediately. I don't know what the uncle's purpose was, but I just couldn't believe that he would not harm us. There's no power over here either. She tried operating the box television, but it would not turn on. She pulled the string on the old-style umbrella light, but it would not turn on. She also opened the refrigerator in the kitchen to find that it was also turned off and empty of food, although there were containers and other trash inside. There was no sign of human habitation to begin with. The man muttered to himself, "This is kind of creepy." We returned to the dark, unlit Japanese-style room and discussed what we should do. There is no electricity in this house, so there is no hope for a telephone. It would be dangerous to walk any further after dark, as we might encounter wild animals. And ironically, we are in a single-story house that can be locked up. In other words, we had no choice but to stay here overnight. Both the man and the woman, including myself, were wondering if there was any way to contact our families or companies today. It was probably around the time the sun had completely set. The light from the LCD screen of the man's cell phone, which was the only light source left, was the sound of drums coming from somewhere. It was a repetition of the rhythm of don don, don don. I thought it was the beginning of a festival or something like that. We thought it was the start of a festival or something, so we listened carefully. The sound was coming from the direction of the street. It was coming from the direction of the bus stop where we got off. In fact, it was quite a distance since we were picked up and dropped off here by an uncle's light truck, but strangely enough, we were sure that it was coming from the direction of the bus stop. What do we do? I wonder if there are people there. I'll have to look and see. To be honest, all three of us were exhausted and anxious, both physically and mentally. After experiencing the fear of the unknown uncle, we thought it would be safer to stay here and wait until morning, just in case there was some strange group beyond the sound of the drums. As the rhythm of the drums approached within earshot, the sound of people's voices also began to mix with the sound of the crowd. Not quite the cheers of a crowd, but a mass of overlapping voices, as if many people were talking to each other. There is no doubt that people are there. The only question is whether they are good people or bad people. Why don't we just take a look? I suggested, thinking it would be better to ask for help from people outside than to stay here overnight with no toilet, bath, or water. If they looked like locals from a distance, I would ask for help. If they looked like a suspicious group, we would turn back to this one-story house. The old lady and the man must have the same desire to get out now if there is a way out of this situation without electricity or food. Let's just see what we see. Let's try to be as undetectable as possible, and if we feel we are in danger, let's run away. The man then looked at the grandmother and said, "You should stay here, grandmother. She won't be able to run if something goes wrong, and even if they were nice people we'll be back here once." I agreed with him that it would be wise, considering her legs, and said, "Grandma, I'll be back as soon as I can. Can you wait here for us?" I said to her. There was no lighting, so I could not catch her expression, but I could sense her anxiety from the feeble volume of her voice. "Okay, I'll wait here, please." The man and I left the one-story house and bent down to look at the road, assimilating the silhouettes of the bushes, trees, and other things along the side of the road. And the moment I peeked out my face, I involuntarily muttered, "What the hell is this?" There was a procession of several hundred people on the road. People were carrying lanterns, torches, and the like at equal intervals, and people dressed in white kimono were moving forward step by step to the sound of drums. The scene reminded us of a lonesome procession of feudal lords or a funeral procession, but we were horrified to see an object displayed at what seemed to be the center of the procession. We were horrified to see a burning object displayed in what appeared to be the center of the procession, like a nobori streamer. In the flames, I could barely see a human figure, and it was being carried like a wheelbarrow on what looked like a foundation made by a large group of people on wheels, propped up on a stick like an oden sukune, sweet potato dumpling. There was no way to tell if it was a puppet or a human being, but I thought it was clearly a group of people in trouble, and I said, "Ah," and started to back away, and the man said, "Let's go back," and bent down and started to back away. I had no idea what that group would do to me if they caught me. I turned back soundlessly to follow the man, and he tripped over something and let out a short scream of woe and fell down grandly. Although there was the sound of a twig or something being stepped on and a slight thud as the man fell, it was drowned out by the sound of drums and the sound of that group talking, so I was high on the idea that I would not be noticed. However, almost as soon as the man raised his body, a loud voice came from the road, "There are people here." I was so relieved that he didn't notice me. What? How could he be recognized by such a voice? I was surprised to hear something whistling in the wind. I could hear the sound of something landing on the ground. And the sound of a bullet landing on something. The man said, "A bow." And a man shouted, "Bow. Kill them." He saw me. This ain't the village. I think such barbaric words were flying from the people in the procession. I looked toward the road, and thanks to the lights that the group was holding up, I could see that each person in the group was wearing some kind of hanya or demon-like mask. It was not a proper festival after all, and by the time I realized that it was a dangerous group, it was too late. I thought that several dozen people from the group had made a mad dash into the darkness, that is, into the bushes where the man and I were hiding, and then, as if they could see where we were, they jumped straight at us and pinned us down. He jumped straight at us and held us down. Ow! Let go of me. The men and I tried desperately to resist, but we couldn't do anything when dozens of people held us down. Then a man wearing an ogre mask, larger than the others, came to us and he was holding a machete. What? A machete? Are you going to be killed? While I was thinking about this, the man took a machete and swung it at the man without a pause. With a short scream, I saw the silhouette of a machete cracking the man's head. As something splattered, the machete was raised again and slammed into the man once more with a thud. The occasional light from the fire made the scene flicker faintly like a shimmering shimmer, and the man with the machete now stood in front of me, swung it over his head, and folded it down on my shoulder. Gya! I was in pain that I had never felt in my life. I screamed so hard that my throat was ripped out. I thought I was going to die in an instant. But I was alive, and when I opened my eyes out of the thin air, they met the eyes of the person wearing the demon mask who raised the machete again, and after a few moments of silence, the machete swung down once more, this time toward my face. I died. Ouch. No, 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 no. I don't want to die in a way that doesn't make sense. I cried out in my heart and prepared myself for a sudden death, but strangely enough, there was no next pain. Not only that, I felt at ease, as if I was being rocked in a comfortable cradle, and sleep came to me. Is this the afterlife? Or is this heaven? As these thoughts were going around, I intuited that my eyelids were moving and I opened my eyes to wake up from this pleasant floating sensation. Next stop. The familiar announcement of the driver. The distinctive smell inside the car. The steady sound of the engine. A pleasant vibration transmitted from the seat. I was inside the bus. I immediately became conscious and looked around the bus in a hurry to see if there were dozens of passengers. I was sitting by the window of a two-seater seat, and an office worker-like woman was out of breath next to me. Looking out of the window, I saw a developed and familiar cityscape. The sun is high in the sky, so it must be lunchtime. I looked at the electric board in the car and saw that the next stop on the display was the name of a station about 8 stops ahead of the one I had seen before I dozed off. Huh? Had I been killed? Is it night already? What about the group? What happened to the old lady and the man? What happened? I racked my fuzzy, dull brain, but could think of nothing. Perhaps the events that began at the unknown bus stop were all a dream. It was a very realistic dream, so my mind was a bit confused right after I woke up, but it was a strange dream. However, there are times when I wonder if this dreamlike experience is actually what I experienced in reality. I was riding the bus to the station where I was getting off, and as I was following some people getting off at the station, I saw the old lady I had met in the dream, and our eyes met. When her eyes met mine, she made a face like "oh," and I almost spoke to her and said "oh," but we didn't exchange another word and she quickly got off the bus. Next, as I followed with my eyes the passengers getting off at the other bus stop, I saw the man I had met in my dream, who looked like an office worker, in the line, and he looked at me and had a surprised expression on his face. The man got off the bus with an awkward look on his face, but there was one thing that bothered me more than the man's attitude. The man had what looked like a flesh-cracked scar on his face that ran from his head to his forehead and down the side of his nose, although it was faint. Incidentally, I did not see such scars on the man's face in my dream. What was disturbing about this was that I went to the changing room as soon as I got home. Then I take off my jacket and look in the mirror with my shoulders out. I saw the same flesh-cracking scar running down my shoulder as the men. The place where the scar was carved was the place where I had been hit with a machete by the guy wearing the demon mask in my dream. As far as I can remember, a man also had his head split open with a machete in a dream. If the scar on that man's forehead is the same as mine, then perhaps the man experienced the same dream as I did. I don't know what this crack-like scar was, but strangely enough, it was gone the next day. I wasn't carrying a heavy bag on that shoulder, nor was it a mark from my clothes or underwear. But from the marks and the reactions of the old lady and the man, I think the three of us must have been having the same dream. Or perhaps we were the only three who had been transported to a different world from reality. No matter how I think about it, it seems to be just a dream I had when I fell asleep on the bus, but the scar on my shoulder that disappeared immediately and the reactions of the man and the old lady do not seem to be a coincidence. I have no way of confirming this, but it really did feel like a real experience. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.